Hey there, my name is Cole Adams, and you are watching the best college basketball podcast out there that covers the entire sport of college basketball, brackets, bubbles, and bid stealers. Now, here are your hosts, Sam Fetterman and Jonathan Lidskin.
Season 6, episode 54 of Brackets, Bubbles, and Steelers. I am Sam Fetterman. That is Jonathan Lipskin. Jonathan, happy Friday, happy feast week, hashtag thank you CBB.
Yeah, one of the best weeks of college basketball this season. Probably the best week that isn't a postseason week.
Yeah, and absolutely. And also hashtag thank you Kevin Sweeney for joining us on this episode of Brackets, Bubbles, and Bit Stealers. Kevin, welcome back to the pod.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, so obviously, before we get into this, make sure that you are following us at BBBCBB Podcast on Twitter so you don't miss when we go live. Turn on those notifications. And if you can't catch a show live, you can always watch it back on YouTube or on Twitter or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you're following us there. Brackets, Bubbles, and Bit Stealers. I had double overtime last night at Colgate Cornell. Colgate's played a couple wild ones this week. But we're not here to talk about any of that stuff. We are here to talk Feast Week. We are here to talk about the biggest games, the biggest teams, and the most important stuff, and all the small stuff. We'll get to that later. But it all starts in Las Vegas because who isn't going to Vegas? It feels like the entire sport is going to congregate in the Sin City this week. It's almost like Summer League in that sense because everyone's going to be there. And it's a pretty big event, the players there at Jonathan. I still don't understand how they fund it. I still don't understand exactly how it works, but it's going to be fun basketball.
Yeah, I share a lot of the same questions you do, Sam, about this event. But when you lay out this graphic in front of me with these games on Monday and Tuesday, and then more to come in the following days, you can't help but be excited by the amount of good basketball that this event will produce.
Jonathan, pick one of those games on Monday that you are the most excited about.
I'll go with
Let me read them off first. Rutgers, Tennessee, Creighton, Baylor, Kansas, Notre Dame, St. John's, Iowa State, Houston, Syracuse, Auburn, Oregon, Gonzaga, Alabama, Michigan, San Diego State, and UNLV, Maryland. I feel like there are two on here that clearly stand out above the rest, and then one that kind of stands out even above that one, even above the other one.
Yeah, I'll take the layup here. I'll go Gonzaga, Alabama. These are two teams that play fast, they're fun offensive teams, and Gonzaga's just been dominating everyone so far this season. Bama saw in person on Wednesday night at the United Center. It's a good basketball team. Probably the easy best matchup on here.
Yeah, you guys both saw Alabama at the United Center. Gonzaga has been blowing teams out this year. This is a fun one, Kevin. What are you looking forward to in this game?
Yeah, it's interesting because, for as good as Gonzaga's been, they have not played a team with a particularly good front court yet. Like Oklahoma's front court's really bad. Creighton's front court's really bad defensively. Arizona State has Diop, but, it's Arizona State, right? And Alabama, quite frankly, I wouldn't say it's a great front court, right? But
no,
they did some things to Illinois, with the way that they switched that was challenging. And I'm not sure that will work the same way against Gonzaga. Gonzaga's going to be a little more physical. They're going to, pack the paint a little bit more and kind of overwhelm in a way that Illinois doesn't want to. But, I just think, maybe no coach in the country is better when they're undermanned in a way of kind of creating matchups that do benefit them than Nate Oates. That's what he's going to have to do against a very good Gonzaga team. So, yeah, I'm excited about it. I do think Gonzaga wins, but I probably would have picked against Bama in all three of their big games so far, and I'd be 1-2 if that was the case.
Jonathan?
Yeah, definitely share a lot of the same thoughts. Bama's going to switch everything. I think Gonzaga's maybe a little more well-equipped to play against that style. And, this is going to be a fun up and down game the first night of this event.
I'm really interested to see how Mark Few decides to attack this and try and guard LeBaron Feinlon and those guys, because we know that Alabama is going to try and hunt mismatches. They're going to try and get Graham Ike or Braden Huff out onto the perimeter on Feinlon, on switches, on whatever. I wonder how Mark Few is going to try and counter that, how much of the freshman from Spain, Mario Saint-Supéry, are we going to see? Are they going to go a little more to Emmanuel Innocente to give them some defensive flexibility guarding the backcourt? Is this a game where we can see a lot of Braden Smith, though? Because, I mean, he's a little undersized, definitely a talented player, but as he is undersized compared to Saint-Supéry in the backcourt. And I do kind of think that the best version of Gonzaga going forward will be one where Saint-Supéry is playing a little bit more than Smith.
Yeah, I think that's right. I do think it's been valuable, especially early on, to have the game manager point guard in Smith. But yeah, I think the size of Saint-Supéry, the dynamic, ability with the ball in his hands, he's been a lot better defensively than I thought he would be. There's a lot to like with him, and I think it changes their team and changes their ceiling when he is as good as he potentially can be. So, I think their best lineup is him, and then getting as many of these big wings on the floor with Worley and Grant Foster, and have those guys flying around defensively, and then the bigs, dominating the post. It's a pretty good recipe.
Yeah, I kind of like the kind of thing that makes Gonzaga such a difficult matchup for Alabama is also the thing that makes Alabama such a difficult matchup for Gonzaga. I think it's because Alabama doesn't have the bodies in the post to match up with Ike and Huff. Nobody really does. But Alabama is so good at getting the mismatches onto the perimeter guards and getting their guys in advantageous situations, whether it's Phylon, whether it's a Holloway, whoever it is, so they can attack those. And I do think it's going to be a fun chess match. I do think these are two of the better coaches in the sport. I just think right now Gonzaga is a little better suited to kind of jump out quickly, get going, and win this ball game. But I don't think anyone would be surprised if this was a game of the year candidate.
Yeah, these two teams played back in 2021.
They played twice.
What'd you say?
They played twice, I think. They played in 21, 22, and then in 22, 23.
Okay, I specifically remember the one in 21 on the Chet Holmgren team. Bama looked pretty well equipped then to handle them, and obviously not much has changed about the system since then.
Yeah, and that was not one of the better Alabama teams either that Oates has had. So that is something to note. I will also say, it kind of sucks that the second game, that only one of the two games for most of these teams is a really high level game in Vegas for the first two. You look at Houston plays Tennessee, but they also play Syracuse. I mean, Syracuse is an interesting team for sure. Tennessee plays Rutgers, but they also play Houston. Alabama plays Gonzaga, but they also play Maryland. They also play UNLV. Gonzaga plays Alabama, they also play Maryland. Michigan kind of has the toughest draw in Players Era, playing against San Diego State and then Auburn. Syracuse probably has a really difficult draw as well, going with Houston and Kansas. We'll get to them later. But Michigan kind of looks a little shaky the first couple games of the season. We've talked about it on the pod, but they've gotten the job done against TCU, against Wake Forest, now going to play against San Diego State, who really needs a win, and an Auburn team that has bounced back pretty well from the Bethune-Cookman near debacle. What does Michigan need to show you, Kevin, this week in Vegas?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're just still very much finding an identity right now. They started Cheddar the other day, which was, I think there's some logic in it. But, I thought in the second half against Middle Tennessee, and again, this is it's the second half against Middle Tennessee. Let's not overreact to it. I thought they found something in terms of Yaxel, you're a physically dominant player, and you need to play like one. I looked at halftime of that game, and for the season, Yaxel had taken 58% of his shots from three. I don't care how good of a shooter Yaxel Endeborg is. That's not a winning recipe for Michigan basketball to be at the level that they expect to be. That's how I see it. And so I think they need to really lean into their identity being big and physical, but they don't necessarily have to play the biggest lineups to do that. I think that's the way I would frame the issue right now is Yaxel at the 4 and either Mara or Merez at the 5 is a overwhelmingly physical lineup already. I'd rather keep all three of them fresh and cycle bodies than want all three of them on the floor together. And you have Cheddar if you want to, stay big and long. If you don't want to be playing three guards, that's a great option. So, yeah, I'll be very curious to see how they respond to this, because their floor is so high that even when they're playing kind of ugly basketball, they're still winning against not bad teams, right? Wake, I think, has proven to be pretty
Away
good.
from home.
Yeah, no question, right? I mean, all right, I'm not going to give them the away from home benefit when they're playing in
The
Detroit,
TCU game,
but
the TCU game
yeah,
for sure.
correct, right? Like, they've won with their C game. That's a good sign. Their ceiling is a lot higher than that. I'd like to see them tap into that some this week. I wouldn't be shocked if they don't. But it wouldn't shock me if they went 2-0, maybe even 3-0 this week, and you're still like, man, Michigan's not quite where they want to be yet. And that is probably the scary part of this Michigan team.
Yeah, and I feel like we said that like a little bit about Oregon last year, like when they won players there, and it still didn't feel like they were what they could have been. And then they kind of never really reached what they probably could have been at their ceiling. But they were still like a solid team, and they had that great resume. And I will look at Michigan from the perspective of Ade Mara played 37 minutes against Wake Forest. He was awesome in the first half. He was the best player on the floor for the first like 25 minutes of that game. And he was not in the last 15. And it's what you mentioned, keeping him fresh. This is a guy that played 31% of the minutes last year at UCLA. And the rate stats were off the charts. The rate stats are still awesome this year. The through shooting is really good. The rebounding rates are great. The block rate is off the charts. But he doesn't need to play 37 minutes. They don't have a roster that's built around him needing to play 37 minutes. They have Merez. They can show you different looks as well with Merez at the 5 versus Mara at the 5. And I think switching up looks within games is something that gives certain teams an advantage. And I think the Dusty May team in particular, somebody that has been able to adapt to winning with rosters in a lot of different ways over the years. That's a guy that knows how to adapt to a different lineup. And I think that he can find a way to make this team hit its ceiling at some point, whether that's playing 3 bigs, whether that's playing 2 bigs, whether that's playing 1. No matter how it goes, I think that Dusty May has the ability to get it done. And San Diego State needs a win because they had the loss to Troy in double overtime earlier this week. They don't really have a ton of big non-conference games either outside of players there. They have Arizona in Phoenix, but that looks like it's going to be a really, really difficult task with how good Arizona has looked early this season. Jonathan, what is the key that you need to see from San Diego State against Michigan and then against Oregon?
Well, the way Michigan's been playing offense, like Michigan might help them with this, but San Diego State's defensive performance the other night was not good. Certainly not on par with what we are used to with a San Diego State team. I think that Guath looked healthy, which is a good sign for them because they absolutely need him. But the fact that Sean Newman is not playing as much and not starting is concerning for me, and I probably downgrade them definitely a little from what I thought of them in the preseason, because that team needed a point guard, and if Sean Newman's not contributing how we thought he was going to, I think Michigan could really eat San Diego State alive defensively.
Yeah, I mean, I look at San Diego State, and I still think they have the pieces to be really good. Miles Bird is obviously awesome. Had a big game in the Troy game, even in the loss. But again, they right now are not getting what they need from certain guys. They're not getting quite what they need. They're not getting quite what they need on the other end, as you mentioned. And for Michigan, for a Michigan game, that's another big team. San Diego State has the size, I think, to compete. And I think they have the size and the athleticism to give Michigan a fight. It's about, can the guards come to play? Can DeGorville come to play? Can Newman come to play? Can Reese Dixon Waters come to play? And can they neutralize at least somewhat Michigan? And I think that, honestly, San Diego State provides a better matchup for Michigan than most teams would, considering how athletic they can be at certain moments. But I also am a little concerned that Michigan might just be able to overpower that in general. And then obviously with Oregon, who has not looked awesome either. They escaped against Hawaii, who actually is pretty good, even though they lost to Arizona State last night. And they escaped against Rice. Oregon has not looked great so far this year. That is definitely a winnable game for San Diego State. And I think they definitely need to come out of this with probably 2 wins in Players Era, going 2-1, or if they somehow can go 3-0.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously, I think there's a lot riding for multiple of these teams, but I do think San Diego State, because of the resume stuff, is probably one that probably feels it most acutely. I think Oregon at the same time feels it, just because of the metrics drain and the fact that their schedule in this event. Like you mentioned, like, a lot of teams kind of get 1-1. Oregon is one of the weird teams in the middle that got stuck with 2 really hard games, Auburn and San Diego State. So, how do you manage, like if Oregon loses those 2? I guess maybe your benefit of that is you play UNLV probably on Wednesday. But although maybe I'm selling
Not really gonna help you. It's not really gonna help you.
I'm selling the running Rebs short. Maybe they win one.
Yeah, I mean, nice win over St. Joe's.
It would also be extremely UNLV to beat Alabama and then turn around and like lose whatever bye game right after the holiday.
They have to go play Stanford after this, so they're going to have to play against our new favorite player, Ibuka Corey.
Ibuka. I mean, look, I think it is funny, like that weird like section of the schedule, because I don't know exactly how they bracketed all this, but it does seem sort of pooled out in a way, where like Auburn plays Oregon and Michigan, San Diego State plays Michigan and Oregon, Auburn plays. Yeah, I'm not adding this up well, but like it seems like those groups, that quartet was sort of potted together, and like it feels like that might be like the swing group in this whole event in terms of resumes and whatnot. And so those will be interesting games to watch Monday, Tuesday, and then whoever they end up drawing Wednesday.
Another big game on Monday: St. John's and Iowa State. St. John's has the loss to Alabama. They have a lot more big games coming up in December as well, with Mississippi coming up and Kentucky in December. But they do have 2 really notable games in Players Era with Iowa State and Baylor against Big 12 teams. Jonathan, what are you most looking forward to seeing in St. John's, Iowa State?
How Iowa State employs Joshua Jefferson in this game, because I think him on the defensive end, like he's not usually, well, he will play some small ball 5. So when he is at the small ball 5, how does that match up versus Zuby Ejiofor look? Is Zuby just too big for him? Is he too overpowering? And then the other thing is, Iowa State, I think, is a team that likes their guards to get out and pressure. How does St. John's handle that with the lack of ball handlers that they have?
Yeah, and then St. John's does have the game against Baylor, which should also be really interesting. The Bears have that win over Washington from earlier this year. They beat Tarleton. Their offense has looked pretty good. Baylor has Creighton and St. John's. Kevin, what is the big question for Baylor coming into Players Era?
I think it's the first real chance to see, their improvement defensively or lack thereof, right? They're a fringe top. They're 34th on KenPom right now defensively. They played pretty well against Washington, a Washington team that was undermanned that day. They played a lot of Bryson Tucker and a lot of, other guys who aren't that great. Like, they gave up 80 points to Tarleton and UTRGV. Like, I think we'll learn a lot about the teeth that this group has. Now, again, I still think the finished product with Bodo will probably look a little different defensively. But if you're buying Baylor this year, it's not, to be more than what they've been the last couple of years, it has to be because they're a much better defense. And I think this, report card so far is incomplete, and they will certainly be challenged by a brilliant offensive coach in Greg McDermott on Monday, and then a very talented offensive roster in St. John's here on Tuesday. And that is not a slight to Rick's offensive abilities. There was more a slight to Creighton's talent. Sorry, just to be clear, I don't want to get clipped.
Yeah. Creighton, obviously, interesting start to the season. They kind of got blown out by Gonzaga. This team's defense, it was a big concern for me coming into the year. I mentioned this a lot over the offseason that, like, obviously it's not a 1-for-1. You can't try and replace Ryan Kalkbrenner 1-for-1, and they're playing a little bit differently. but the idea that basically you had a generational college basketball rim protector in Kalkbrenner and rim deterrent for that many years, and they replaced his minutes basically with a guy in Owen Freeman who is very much not an excellent defender, and they have not been strong defensively for the most part this year. 76 points to South Dakota, 90 to Gonzaga. They have Baylor and Iowa State, two teams that should be really fun offenses this year. So very curious to see how this looks for them. We want to move from that to talk about Kansas, who plays Notre Dame and then Syracuse. Not exactly the biggest gauntlet for the Jayhawks, which could be good, could be bad, considering they already have the two high major losses to Duke and North Carolina. They also have UConn coming up right after Players Era, but they may not. They may be without Darren Peterson at some point. Do we think he can play? And if he doesn't play, could Notre Dame or Syracuse kind of give them a scare?
I mean, I wouldn't feel overly confident in anything Kansas does without Darren Peterson. I will say, I thought they played well against Duke. Like, for what they are without DP, like they found a way to punish Duke on the inside, and like, good luck to Carson Tout and Keba Jai if Kansas plays with that level of intensity and drives the basketball hard, like, they're going to give Notre Dame some problems. I think they'd give Syracuse some problems as well in that regard, although Syracuse has been statistically a good defense this year. I'm relatively skeptical that that's not that's matchups and also nobody making a jump shot against them. So look, I would say
nobody really making jump shots against them for the most part either.
I would say this. I think I would love to see DP play. I think there's a good chance we will see him in some form. It is hard, though, if you're going to play 3 games in 3 days off of a hamstring injury that you haven't practiced a ton. Like, when do you use him? How strategically? What do you do with his minutes? So, I know the NBA people that are all flocking to Vegas would be very upset if he does not play at all. So it'll be interesting. I mean, I think you have to win these next 2 if you're Kansas, and then you hope you get like a serious matchup in Game 3. Not that they need the resume, right? Like, at some point they're playing Carolina, Duke, UConn, Mizzou, NC State on the road, and then Big 12 play. Like, their resume will survive if they don't get a big game in Players Era, but it'd be nice to go get a big one this week and stack something and really build some momentum and confidence, whether they win the tournament or come in third or however it ends up shaking out.
Jonathan, Tennessee hasn't played anybody so far this year. They've played Mercer, Northern Kentucky, North Florida, Rice, Tennessee State. Not quite as bad as Syracuse's schedule, but no, not a great schedule either. They get Rutgers on Monday, then Houston on Tuesday. What do you need to see from the Vols, Jonathan?
Yeah, I don't foresee them having an issue on Monday, but on Tuesday is a really interesting game for me because I think Tennessee right now, they really only have 2 guys that I trust to consistently score for them. And outside of that, they have a lot of players who do good things on both sides of the ball, but not a lot of them score. I think Tuesday is a really interesting game for Nate Ahmed. It's his first real game that counts competition against a really good defense. And Sam, like, the questions that you and I had about Ahmed is like, can he create advantages? Like, does he move well enough to like be a good offensive player at the college level? There's no question that he's going to be a pro next year. But Houston's defense is versatile. It's obviously very, very tough. One of the best defenses in the country, if not the best. And I think this is like the first real test because they're going to need him, Ahmed, I should say, to be able to consistently create to get good shots.
Yeah. Houston, obviously, they play Syracuse and then they play Tennessee. We talked about the Cougs earlier in the week. Don't think there's a huge thing that we need to go over here that we haven't already with this team. Kingston Flemings has been one of the best players in the sport thus far. And I think that, even though Milos Uzan kind of hasn't been at his absolute best so far, he was like that at the beginning of last year too. I don't think it's anything to worry about. And with Fleming's playing as well as he is, that's been awesome. Tugler, obviously, the best defender in the sport. So they will give matchup problems to anybody that they play against. But I am very, very interested to see that Tennessee game. Then if anyone has anything on Maryland,
real quick, we didn't get a Link Academy versus Highland game last year, right? That any of us remember. I just want to know if there's a data point out there for Snack versus Event. I don't think that they played.
It seems unlikely given the schedule that Highland played.
Yeah. If anyone has anything on UNLV, Maryland, Rutgers, or Notre Dame, go ahead. But I really don't.
I mean, I think Notre Dame's been fine to start the year and probably should have beaten Ohio State.
Should have called a timeout.
Yeah, I mean, no question. But they're starting to feel like they have the identity that Shrewsbury's good team and Penn State had, where they're tough as nails and rebound the basketball, and then they bomb away from three, and then Burton tries to save the day, right? And that's a high enough variance style to win some games. Again, they're just with their schedule, right? I think they probably lose to Kansas even if Darren plays. Even if Darren doesn't play, I think they probably beat Rutgers even if they're healthy. And then we see what happens in game 3. But this is an important stretch for them, right? It's Players Era and then Mizzou in ACC, SEC at home. That's a good opportunity. And then you go to TCU, which could be a quad 1. That's a winnable quad 1. Make some hay now. And we could be talking about this as a tournament team. If not, you're going to look up and be like, all right, what do we have to do in a lot of these ACC games to scratch and claw our way to the dance?
It does feel like Notre Dame's been missing a player like Jalen Harrelson that'll from the wing get downhill, draw fouls.
Yeah, I agree. That's it for Players Era. There's kind of a lot to go over, and there's no really linear way to do it. I don't really know even how to make a prediction for this. Who's going to go 3-0? I don't know, because who's going to play who?
Yeah, we don't know who's playing on Wednesday.
Me at the blackjack table. 3 nights undefeated. Please. That's the only thing that matters.
Maui Invitational feels like a watered down field this year, obviously, because of Players Era. Last year, we had one of the best Mauis ever. This year, we have not that. The top of this bracket I think has the 2 best teams in the field with NC State and USC. NC State plays Seton Hall, USC plays Boise State. USC and Boise State have each had some scares. Obviously, USC had the near loss to Troy the other night. That was at 1 a.m. The game ended. And then Boise State obviously has the loss to Hawaii Pacific already. But had that big win against Wichita State at home. I think if Boise State is going to make a run for an at-large this year, they have to beat USC and get into this winner's bracket.
Yeah, I think that's true. I do think that the bracket, this bracket's weird in that it's been much maligned, and I think for good reason. But I do look up and I'm like, all right, I could see a world where this team is okay. I don't know. Maybe I'm a real idiot, but I'm drinking as much Seton Hall Kool-Aid as exists at the moment. I kind of think I think there's a world that they're a tournament team this year.
I don't know. Maybe a crown team. Maybe a crown team.
No. Well, the crown is a tournament, but I'm buying the Hines thing. I'm buying their defense. I'm buying Bud Clark. Simpkins has been phenomenal, which I think has definitely exceeded all expectation. I don't know, man. Look, what sucks for them is that their draw is just much harder than pretty much anyone else's, given that they play NC State and then USC, presumably if they win, or Boise, right? They could be 0-2 heading into day 3 and have played pretty well. But again, feel free to tell me I'm crazy. Seton Hall is blocking 30.7% of their opponents' shots.
No, yes, they've looked I don't think anyone will be complaining about what Seton Hall has done thus far. And Bud Clark, good player.
They're hard to play against. Shaheen's best teams have been always a pain in the rear end to play against. This team is very much that. And now you're going to play them on short preps in Maui, and a lot of like toughest team wins type of situations. Like, I don't know, man. Like if they get past NC State, watch out. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I could see them making noise against like a USC or a Boise State. USC might be tough because that's like a really physical front court as well.
But like, are we sure USC's showing up like at day 2 against Seton Hall? They're thinking they got a break. You know, it's like, I don't know. Don't sleep on the Pirates, man.
It's a good question. Like, there's really not like NC State's the closest thing to a sure thing in this field.
Yeah.
I would say I watched their game against UAB. I watched a little bit of it.
I'd say Chaminade's probably a sure thing.
Yeah, like we know
to go 0-3.
I mean, yeah. But Boise's got to be seeing absolute crowd noise to the max. If having already lost to Hawaii Pacific, now you might have to play Chaminade. I mean, they land on the island and they're like, seeing ghosts. This is scary stuff.
That's great. The last game in this Arizona State Texas, I don't think I have any interest in staying up late to watch that.
You got to be a real sicko to suffer. It's not even sicko behavior because it's not a good basket. It's not like a random fun mid-major game. It's just like one crown team and one NIT team because of their conference affiliations.
Washington State again, like just not a good start to the year. They had that loss to Idaho. Just they had the loss to Davidson as well. Have not been impressed with what David Riley's team has looked like this year. Think David Riley's a good coach, but that team has just not guarded anything this year. And just think the talent level is just way lower than it was last year. So they'll beat Chaminade most likely.
I will not confidently say that Washington State will beat Chaminade. I think they'll beat Chaminade. I will not say they will beat Chaminade.
Yeah, Chaminade could be frisky. Like,
are there going to be lines for Chaminade games?
Does anyone have a Chaminade scouting report? I haven't done.
I haven't.
There was a message on the Mid-Major Madness account that someone sent. That was like, "Oh yeah, we play that crazy IU Indy style," and I was like, "Do you?" Like, I don't know about that, but they might play fast.
Hey, you just don't walk into Lahaina and take out the silver swords like that.
They're 2-1 on the year. They beat Alaska 102-86 in Western Washington. They have a loss at Alaska Anchorage.
They played Hawaii in an exhibition game.
Yeah, they lost by 6.
Okay, that's interesting.
Chaminade money line. Chaminade money line.
Okay.
Lock it in.
It is notable. They after this tournament, their next game is at Hawaii Pacific.
Oh, that's must watch. That's must watch.
Dial it in. Yeah.
All right. Who do we have winning Maui?
NC State.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a chicken. I can't pick Seton Hall. I'll take the pack.
Yeah, NC State kind of just feels like the team that they're just more talented than the rest of this field. I mean, USC is talented, obviously, but I think NC State is more of a sure thing to show up. They've been making a lot of shots this year. I don't think they even need to make as many shots as they've been making so far in order to win in this. I will be interested to see if they get matched up against USC, how USC's front court with Kofi and Dickerson and CBM and company kind of goes up against Darion Williams, because Darion Williams has looked like a first team, second team All-American type guy so far. He had a huge game against VCU. He had the huge game against UNC Greensboro as well. He's shooting 62% from 3 right now. Paul McNeil has been awesome as well. Did not show up in the VCU game, but has made 13 threes. He made 16 all of last year. I think NC State just has a lot of firepower too. And I think like Copeland, you can kind of throw on anyone defensively. Holloman has played in these types of games before. He was obviously in Maui last year with Michigan State. And he had that big game against North Carolina. So that kind of gives you the big game experience from him and Williams. And you get that from Arsenault too, if he's going to be able to go, which we are not sure about at this point. But I think NC State's kind of built for this bracket at this point compared to the rest of these teams.
Yeah, they feel like they've figured out more than anyone else about like their team.
Yeah, just not a super exciting Maui this year in terms of the field.
I actually am more intrigued by Atlantis.
Oh, I'm very intrigued by Atlantis. There are a lot of teams that a lot of their season could kind of ride on what happens these couple days. You've got a lot of exciting mid-major teams: VCU, South Florida, Colorado State, Wichita State, and St. Mary's. All of those teams have had things to be excited about so far. And like this is the type of field that I love to see. Maybe it's a Charleston Classic field a couple years ago, but like that's totally fine.
There's a world where this tournament includes the A10 champ, the American champ, Mountain West champ, and the WCC champ.
Yeah, absolutely, and like a really good team out of the SEC as well in Vandy. Mm-hmm. Can anyone take down the Commodores, Kevin?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I do think Vandy's better than they were a year ago, but as I recall, Vandy played St. Mary's last year. Or they played Nevada, maybe.
They did play St.
Mary's in the tournament last year.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I'm locked and loaded today. My goodness. You're right. They played St. Mary's in the tournament and lost. They also played but they played an MTE against. They played that Nevada Seton Hall Drake, and obviously Drake's a different challenge. But there are some similarities in terms of like grind you to a halt, relentless attention to detail. And I worry about that for Vandy, especially a Vandy team that just has not played a competitive minute this year, really. Like, how do they respond in a game against St. Mary's that can protect the rim and force you into a slugfest, right? Look, I mean, that matchup would scare me. I think there's multiple teams in this field that can beat them. I don't think Vandy's unbeatable. I think Vandy is off to a great start. I think Vandy is a really dangerous team. I don't think they're like an untouchable team in this field. I also think just like kind of big picture on this field, what I love is that it's like a flat enough field in terms of the matchups where like you're not destroyed if you lose your first game. Right, yeah, you're not destroyed. Like, and look, I don't think Wichita's going to be an at-large team. I don't think that, some of these other teams will be. I'm not sure Colorado State's even at-large good, although they're 51st in KenPom now. But like, if you're Colorado State, you don't feel like your entire season comes down to winning the first one because if you lose it, you're going to play, the dregs. Like, they should get, other than Western Kentucky, like every game should at least be quad 2 in this event, and there's a chance that some of these will sneak into Q1. So I think
Western Kentucky, I haven't seen them this year, but they're 144 in KenPom, 4-0.
They're feistier than I think people expected. Murdoch's is finally healthy, but yeah, I think I love the opportunity for matchups. I love the stylistic divides between Colorado State and Wichita bombing from 3, and St. Mary's playing St. Mary's ball, and Vandy with their incredible efficiency on the offensive end, Virginia Tech with Avdalis, like South Florida up and down, flying it up up the floor. Like, this is going to be a great event. I think they're all actually if you were to go to Atlantis this week, you would not be disappointed in the hoops you watch, even if it's not the brands that you're necessarily expecting to see in that type of tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And we mentioned it, like the 7th place game in this, the 5th place game in this, the losers bracket is going to matter. The winners bracket is going to matter. I think all 12 games that we see in Atlantis are going to be, maybe not all of them are going to be exciting because St. Mary's might do that thing where they just decide you're not going to score anymore. But I think that we're going to see 12 basketball games that matter and 12 basketball games with some sort of implication down the road. The VCU South Florida game, really interesting. VCU obviously has the loss to NC State already this year, but we talked about VCU a bit on the last pod. They also had the loss to Utah State. We talked about them a bit on the last pod about how we're still really not all that concerned. Tyrell Ward is kind of coming back from some stuff. Hasn't really fully gotten into flow yet, but this could be a big opportunity for him. Nick Lewis has been really, really good so far as well. Jadrian Tracy, Barry Evans, still the reasons why I was excited about VCU in the preseason. I still have reason to be excited about them going forward. And South Florida, again, another team with 2 losses, but another team that I think can play some really exciting ball. When Joe Pinion is hitting threes, I think they could match up with just about anybody in this field for sure. And obviously they got a good game from Pinion against Oklahoma State, and they allowed 103. So definitely a little bit of concern with South Florida defense. Would love to see just a little more from them on that end of the floor, but they'll score a lot of points, and if they catch someone on an off night, they could have a big game. We mentioned Colorado State, obviously, as a team that has been impressive thus far. 50th in Ken Palm. Not sure if that's going to hold, but Ali Farouk-Manesh with a really strong start to his time at the helm for the Rams.
And they're doing it without Bemba, which is like a big deal. I don't know what his status is for Atlantis. I haven't asked, but I think their long term definitely involves Rashawn Bemba being available and being giving them a physical option up front to pair with Jorgensen and Kerry Booth.
Yeah, and that could hurt them if they don't have him against Amani Hansberry, who can kind of bully you a little bit, even though he's a little undersized. He's that type of player. Lawal, more of the pogo stick type. But Virginia Tech, again, Abdallas is awesome, but it's not just him that's hit. Hansberry's been good. Lawal was their best player last year, and he's back. Tyler Johnson has had some really good moments this year. Jalen Bedford has looked good. So I think that there's been a lot to like about Virginia Tech so far, even beyond Abdallas. So it's something to keep an eye on for sure. But yeah, I do think at the end of the day, this comes down to St. Mary's and Vandy.
Yeah, those are the 2 best teams, no question about it. But also 2 teams that have probably inflated themselves with the way they've dominated, by games to a metrics point. That's
not
probably
that St. Mary's hasn't been playing like good teams.
Oh, I'm not saying they're not playing solid teams. I'm just saying, look, are we sure that St. Mary's is a top 25 team? Are we sure that Vandy's a top 5 team?
I'm pretty sure
the metrics say those things are true. I want to see it. I want to see it in high level games.
Yeah, I don't think St. Mary's right now is a top 25 team.
Right. So they are inflated at the moment. Yeah.
Yes, but they have been playing.
They could be there. Yeah, they could be there. No question. And it wouldn't shock me. St. Mary's could rip through this tournament. It would not shock me.
It's not out of character either.
No. I just think those 2 in particular, the way that they play has allowed them to, and two very different styles, but both of them have been able to, both of those teams have been able to put themselves in a position analytically to be perceived as one of the best teams in the country. And I think we still need to see some of it with those 2 teams. And so this will be a valuable test against a step up competition.
Yeah, I picked St. Mary's and the Silver Sword this week, but I mean, I gotta ride with the Doors, if we're being honest here, considering how highly I spoke of them in the preseason. I had them in my top 20. I've got to keep that up. I've got to keep building that hype for my Doors with Tyler Tanner, who's been awesome, and Devin McLaughlin. I feel like hasn't even been at his absolute best yet so far this year, and that was a guy that I thought was going to be one of the best players in the country this year. So I gotta ride with the Doors. Jonathan, who are you going with?
I picked St. Mary's.
Kevin.
I wanted to be different and unique and pull one of the other 2 out. Actually, you know what? I think no, I can't do it. That's St. Mary's. I was itching to take Colorado State, and I couldn't get there physically.
Yeah, Brady Children's Invitational next week in San Diego. We've got Florida against TCU, and then Wisconsin against Providence. Coming into this year, obviously Florida was the clear perceived favorite in this. They probably still are. But we've talked on this pod about how we've been concerned about the way Florida's looked so far this year. Kevin, are you a little bit concerned about how Florida's looked this year?
I mean, I guess it depends on what you're What rises to concern? Like, are you like, oh man, Florida might be the 7th best team in the country this year?
I mean, like, yeah, this is the team. This is the team that was the national champion. They're expected to have a chance to go back to back, and they simply so far haven't been one of the 20 to 25 best teams in the sport. They probably.
I strongly disagree with that. First of all, they played Arizona to 6 points, excuse me, in a game that they didn't make it. They couldn't make butt naked open threes. They handled Miami. I think Florida State's good. Like I think Florida State's a fringe tournament team. Probably didn't play great in that game. I think their front court gives them an incredibly high. Like I think Florida is probably between the 8th and 12th best team in college basketball this year.
I think that's fair. I just think so far we haven't seen them play to the level that they should be able to play to.
So do you think Arizona was like I mean, the world has decided Arizona is like one of the 2 best teams in the country.
Oh, they're awesome. I just think that
Florida had every opportunity to win that game just by playing poorly, and Koa having the game of his life.
I also just
Jaden Bradley was unbelievable.
Say Florida's strength got outstrengthed in a game.
Right, but there's 2 teams that can do that, and every other team in the country, Florida's going to.
I don't disagree. I'm just saying that so far, from what we've seen, Florida's strength last year obviously was the guards. This year it's the front court, and I don't think that the guards this year are as good as the front court last year. And I don't know, and I don't quite know.
I think that's fair.
And I don't quite know if the front court this year is as good as the guards were last year. And like maybe they get there. So far,
if it's national title or bust, I'm willing to say the Florida's a disappointment. Yeah, if it's like, oh, could they make another Final Four? I think I feel pretty good about Florida. I'm also just convinced they're going to make shots. Like Boogie and Xavier Lee being 2 for 17 and 6 for 34 just isn't going to hold. Like it's just I don't care if they're not even good shooters. It's just not going to hold.
Yeah, it's just like Jonathan and I were doing an exercise the other day where we were like naming who we thought, like based on what we've seen so far, and like we're the top 10 teams in the sport. And Florida just didn't come to mind for either of us at that point. Maybe we're overreacting. Maybe we are.
They still come to mind for me.
But I would not right now. If I had to do like a top 25, Florida would be towards the back. That could change. I still expect them to be a threat in the SEC down the road, and I still expect them to end up as a top 4, top 5 seed in the NCAA tournament for sure. Maybe a top 2 seed. But right now, I have not seen what I want to see from the Gators, and I think that I think they'll beat TCU, and I think that Wisconsin will beat Providence, and I think it'll set up a really, really fascinating game because we talked about this yesterday. I said I think Wisconsin, with the injuries BYU has the matchup advantage against BYU. Yeah. And man, Wisconsin against Florida could be another really, really interesting one in the Rady Children's Invitational.
It's a great matchup. I do think it will be a fascinating matchup in terms of, as you said, like, the physicality that Florida plays with up front. Like, I think Winter's a phenomenal player, but it'll be a great test for him of just like when he's a full-time 5, essentially, or close to a full-time 5. Do Chinyelu and Han-Logton just wear him down, right? And then if Rapp's your 4-man, like Kondo, and if they're going to play 3 guards, how like they have a chance to kind of get punked a little bit, but at the same time, Wisconsin's been a great rebounding team so far this season. Now, again, that's been very poor competition. We'll see how it holds against BYU, who's much better. But that, to me, is really the matchup. Is Wisconsin able to hang in physically? If they can, they might have the better guards in the game. And
I think right now, based on what we've seen, they do have the better guards.
Yeah,
now,
I think that's fair.
John Blackwell's
the best. Blackwell's the best guard in the game, no question. And Boyd has played phenomenal so far.
Blackwell has a chance to be an All-American this year, and it was kind of the guy that in the Big Ten, like not enough people were mentioning as a potential All-American guard preseason. I think after this tournament, there's a chance people are mentioning him a lot more in that conversation. And Nick Boyd has had really high usage thus far. We mentioned that he's been running the pick and roll at a high level. And this is, again, they've been doing this. Obviously, they're doing this, and Rapp still hasn't really caught fire yet. Winter, we know he's obviously, a decent stretch guy hasn't been shooting it as well. So I think they have the opportunity to open up even more than what we've seen so far from those options. If they can start getting more shooting from their front court, which I think they will. Maybe Ja Black was not going to shoot 50% for three all year, but they have the potential to be one of the best offenses in college basketball this year. I am definitely a little worried about the depth. Especially if playing 2 games back to back, and especially with the second one being against a physical Florida team. But it will be a fun matchup if we get it. Moving on to Greenbrier, some games that we're going to see today. I don't know where Jonathan went, but I was listening to Eye on College Basketball this morning, and Garrett Parrish was sorting data, as he does. And Northwestern and Virginia have both been in the top 20 of Torvik without preseason bias so far this year. Jonathan was talking about Northwestern as a tournament team the other night. I like what I've seen from them. I know you saw them in person in a wild one against DePaul. Virginia was a team I was very high on in the preseason. That's a really fun matchup that honestly should be the championship matchup of this, but we're getting it today.
Yeah, it will be very fascinating. I think, for Northwestern, the way that Page has solidified their front court has been massive. I do think defensively and on the glass, there will be some bumps in the road with that in higher level games. And this is the first truly higher level game that they will play. But, Reed has been very good. Martinelli's Martinelli. And, they have pretty impressive size 2 through 5 when they're playing Sheravino and Martinelli and Singleton and Page. That's pretty good group. So I like Northwestern. I'm not convinced that I would say this. I'm not convinced that they're good enough to beat Virginia because I love Virginia's talent, but I do think a lot of what Virginia's done early this season is just overwhelm in talent their opponents, and they're not going to be able to do that for the first time against Northwestern. So it's a great game. It should be a lot of fun.
I love Virginia coming into the season. I haven't had any reason to not love Virginia anymore. They're already up from 59 to 41. They have a real chance. I forgot to mention this is not a bracketed event. Sorry on that. I just had to pull up the Virginia KenPom page to remember that. But DeRitter is awesome. Virginia's got some size and some strength inside with him and Grunlow. Thomas, we know he can score. I think they'll be able to block a ton. They'll be able to kind of control the paint against a lot of teams this year. This is going to be one of the more fun games that we see on Feast Week. It's going to be a lot more fun than that Northwestern Auburn game in Feast Week a couple of years ago. That ended like 43-42, which is my defining Northwestern Feast Week memory right now. Hopefully this one can provide us a better one. Butler, South Carolina, don't really have many thoughts on that one. South Carolina has not been good. Even though they're 4-0, they struggled with Southern Miss. They're down from 86 to 88 in KenPom. Eli Ellis has been a lot better than I expected. I will say that, but don't really have many thoughts on the Gamecocks right now. Butler, kind of interested to see them against Virginia, as I am to see much more so than I am to see South Carolina against Northwestern, I would say. Butler obviously lost to SMU. I think they could have won that game on the road, but Butler could use a big weekend for sure.
It's a massive week because they have, other than this, they have Boise at home, which could easily end up quad 3 if Boise, starts to stumble here. And they have Northwestern, which could be a quad 2. Like, they don't have a ton of opportunities, and the Big East doesn't seem like he's going to provide a ton of them. So SMU is a missed opportunity. They have to find a way to win 1 at least this week, and if they could win 2, that would be huge. Yeah.
To ESPN events where there are 3 brackets. There's the first one, which is the big one, which has high major teams plus Dayton, BYU, Miami, and then Georgetown, Dayton. We don't know what BYU will look like for this. We don't know whether they will have Kepakeda. We don't know, probably won't have Kennard Davis. And that's obviously really difficult for them to lose. Miami in itself, though, not a particularly deep team. They did go, they went 9 deep against Florida, but it was mostly the starters, as we've mentioned. And those guys are the key to everything that they do. They're going to be a team that's going to play you hard. They're going to defend. But I think BYU should be able to get by them. But man, you got to play if BYU has to play Miami and Georgetown back-to-back days. That's 2 like tough, physical, in-your-face defense teams, and I think that's going to be a really fun test for AJ DeBonsta, Richie Saunders, and Rod Wright with the amount of scoring that we want. That's a team we know that they can be capable of putting out there.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of strikes me that this whole tournament's about BYU, and if BYU is the team that we think they are, these are 2 games they should win. Regardless of who the second matchup is, I think they should beat Miami. Like, if this is a top 10 to 15 team in the sport, on home and neutral courts, you should be beating, bubble teams. And I think they were solid against Villanova. They were not great. They were bad against UConn for a lot of that game and then surged back. We'll see what the Wisconsin thing looks like today. There's, I need to see BYU deliver at some point, and this will be a good opportunity for them to do that.
Yeah, and Georgetown, still only 70th in KenPom. Maybe to me at this point this season, the most the team that I still feel like is the lowest in KenPom. I know that the kind of playing it relatively close with Binghamton and Morgan State has to do with that, but they had those 2 high major wins. They're going to be a tough physical team all year. They feel like an Ed Cooley team. And I think that's really good for the Big East in a year where we haven't seen very much. Man, would it be huge for the Big East if Georgetown could go and grab 2 wins? And also, if these are also 2 very losable games for Georgetown, and if Georgetown kind of buries some of their goodwill that they've built up with the Maryland and Clemson win, and the Maryland win might not age particularly well if Payne is out for a while.
I'm not convinced the Clemson win will age as well as it looks right now. I mean, I'm not saying
there's a good chance that's ending up quad 2, considering you got to be top 30, and Clemson's probably not going to be top 30 even if they're a tournament team, which I think they probably will be, but who knows? And obviously for this is a really big moment for the A10 and for the Big East. I think all of these games will matter for the NCAA tournament picture. For these conferences, for these teams. Dayton has the win over Marquette. Who knows how that's going to go? Like, Marquette could end up not even on the road could end up being quad 2 with how things have looked. I assume it's not going to, but we'll have to see. And Dayton already had the opportunity against Cincinnati that it lost. Have loved kind of Keontae Jones's energy. Deshane Montgomery's playing a lot more confident, but Amel Atong just hasn't taken that step forward. I want to see him take that step forward in this tournament for sure. And again, just 4 games that will all matter when we get to March, and how we are divvying up these conferences, how we feel about these teams going forward. To the imagination and adventure brackets. I don't really have any thoughts on imagination. I think Furman's kind of been a little disappointing. Illinois State, we don't know what they are defensively. Well, we kind of know what they are defensively. It's not good. And Chase Walker, I think he didn't play last night against their non-D1. So not sure if he's going to go. Hopefully he goes in this event that starts next Thursday. They've got Charlotte, who I'm not going to admit to knowing a ton about. Just not very. The imagination bracket isn't one that I am extremely interested in. The adventure one I think is fascinating. There are a lot of brands here. Like you got, Temple, Princeton, Liberty, Vermont, but like Princeton's clearly down this year. Temple might be a little better than they have been, but Vermont, who knows? Kind of, they looked a lot better with Yalden against Northeastern, and then they went out and lost to Buffalo. But Buffalo might actually be decent. They're 5-0. Liberty is clearly the best team in this, but I mean, UC San Diego has had some interesting moments. Bradley kind of needs some wins. Towson is projected to be one of the better teams in the CAA. do you think who do you think has the best shot at taking down Liberty here?
Man, I mean, it's hard for me to buy really anyone in that group being better than Liberty. I do think that Temple probably intrigues me the most just because of their, newfound kind of offensive firepower with Tobias in, and Gavin Griffiths is making shots all of a sudden. And, I think their talent level also probably is closest to Liberty in this group. But yeah, it's to me a good little mid-major event, good opportunities for games. I don't know how, it works financially for Disney, but it's certainly the type of event that, I think these type of programs need and will benefit from if they can't get high major games. So, yeah, it should be a fun little week for those teams. And yeah, we should learn a lot about some of these mid majors and help and sort of delineate some pecking orders in terms of conference strength, I think, as well from something like this.
Yeah, I think one thing that I really like about one thing that kind of is a trickle down effect of the top tournaments not being as great as we get is that the 8-team tournaments that still are sticking it out give us some really interesting mid-major fields. Like obviously, I don't think we're going to be talking about UC San Diego or Bradley or Temple in an at-large conversation, but these are all teams that I think are fascinating to look at in one way or another. And it'll be fun to keep an eye on the adventure bracket next week down at ESPN Wide World Sports. Moving on to Palm Desert, California, right just north of the freeway in the Coachella Valley, home of the Firebirds, where I once went to Game 6 of the Calder Cup Finals back in 2023. There are 4 events, all with a couple teams, all with 4 teams. The first, the Acrisure Classic, which features Iowa, Mississippi, Grand Canyon, and Utah. Utah had the loss to Cal Poly last night, but Iowa, Mississippi should be a really fun one. You've got Chris Beard and Ben McCollum going at each other.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great first real test for Iowa. See kind of how they measure up against high-level talent. An Ole Miss team that is probably better than I expected. Camardine's just been phenomenal. Great tactical battle. My gut says Iowa actually, but I may pivot on that by the time we actually get there. But it's a really good matchup. In general, I hate these weird 14 pod things that Acrisure has built. It's, to me, the whole thing is sort of blah, but that is one of the matchups that is certainly worth circling if you're going to be out there.
Yeah, I was big on this Iowa team in the preseason. Bennett Sturks obviously is awesome. We know what he is, but kind of they didn't really get the scale-up games last year with Drake the way that they're going to get the scale-up games early this year. They've got a pretty fun stretch coming up. They've got obviously Mississippi in this one, and then they'll play either Grand Canyon or Utah. Neither of those teams have neither of those teams are awesome, but certainly will be in some ways more competitive than a lot of the opponents they faced last year at Drake. Then Michigan State away. That's going to be a really interesting test. First away game in the Big Ten for McCollum and Sturts. It's against Tomaso at the Breslin. Then they get Maryland, and then they go to Iowa State. So really wild stretch coming up for them. I think they've been playing a little faster this year than they did at Drake. 70 possession game against Xavier. I think they kind of have a little more of the athleticism, but I think at the end of the day, they're still going to want to play that style that's won them so much at different levels. I also kind of want to note Hausen. We mentioned on the last pod that he had only been playing 12 minutes a game. He played 20 and 15 in the last 2, hit 3 threes in each. Kyle Combs got a start last night, played 32 minutes, had 5 assists. And then Mississippi, obviously, another team that has had a strong start. They had the Memphis win. They had to win a battle with Austin Peay. That game got a little closer late, and it was only a 7-point win. Austin Peay's a solid team. Another team's got an interesting stretch coming up because they've got Miami and St. John's after this. So you mentioned Camardine. He's been their best player, and I think that's kind of what the ceiling situation was for them, because they definitely weren't going to be hitting their ceiling if AJ Storr was their best player, because we've seen what happens with that down the stretch of the season. moving forward, Grand Canyon, Utah, do you have anything on either of those teams? Obviously, the Utah lost last night.
I mean, Utah's a wreck as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
I'm not buying Grand Canyon, but I am continuing to sell as much Utah as I can sell. So
yeah, kind of a big like for the Mountain West. Like, can't really have Grand Canyon lose to Utah because Utah is clearly like not good, and Grand Canyon. I mean, they're on the verge of falling out of the Ken Pom top 100 right now. You don't want that if you're the Mountain West, which has already suffered a bunch of big losses. Obviously, GCU's lost to Youngstown State. They got smacked by St. Louis, and we'll get into St. Louis in a sec. The Mountain West, obviously, you've got good results from teams like Utah State and Colorado State, but you've had some rough results. New Mexico, one of them last night, just was not particularly competitive with Nebraska. Not that that's going to end up being a bad loss. Nebraska looks pretty good, but that's just another missed opportunity for the Mountain West, who has already piled up a bunch of losses already this year. So they could use a big performance from Grand Canyon here. I think that the Invitational, though, is the bracket of the Acrisure that I'm most fascinated by. I think all four of these teams have storylines. St. Louis looks like, to me, so far, the best team in the A-10. They're 4-0. They just pounded Grand Canyon. I don't think the scoreboard does it justice. They were up 27 with 6 minutes left. Amari McCautry has taken the leap. He's breaking out. He's been awesome. Robbie Avila is still awesome. And I think there's so many guys on this team that can score. They're deeper, so much deeper than they were last year. And then they play a Santa Clara team that is 5-0 and has a chance to kind of start sneaking up the ranks and build a sneaky at-large case if they can pick off some wins in Palm Desert.
Yeah, I mean, Santa Clara's size and athleticism is just so hard to find at this level. And, you know, I still think they have their flaws. And I think offensively it's going to come and go on a night-to-night basis. But, like, when you're lining up and you can put Darlin and Mahi and Ensminger and Oboye, like, they have some bodies, man. And that's an interesting challenge for SLU because of, you know, I think teams that can get into them and then that can protect the rim are the teams that are going to have the best chance of dealing with them. I do think St. Louis is the better team. I think St. Louis is really, really good, but it's a fascinating matchup. I will just point out as I look at a Ken Pom page that Thierry Darlin right now has a 1.8% assist rate and a 35.8% turnover rate, which does not seem particularly good. I will say, I mean, I was texting someone and said, you know, we broke the NCAA on transfers just so Raekwon Battle could lose 20 games at West Virginia, and we may have broken the NCAA on professionals so that Thierry Darlin can average 4 points a game at Santa Clara. So,
yeah,
what can you do? You know.
Yeah, but then the other game in this, two high majors that maybe came into the season a little undervalued in Stanford and Minnesota. Minnesota had that did not have a good performance against Chicago State or Green Bay, but I think there's still some excitement for them because of how well Cade Tyson has been playing. I think there's at the end of the day they did get the job done in both of those games. Minnesota plays San Francisco tomorrow, so that's an interesting one. And then obviously it's the Stanford game. It will be fun because Stanford with Ibuka Okori, as we've mentioned. And then Ibuka Okori is not the only find on this team. Right? They have AJ Rahosi, who was playing for Division III Claremont Mudscripts last year, was a former Washington State recruit for Kyle Smith, transferred down to D3. He's now been awesome for Stanford. Chizo Makpara, who was at Harvard before, kind of didn't adjust particularly well last year, but has been really good this year. So Stanford at 4-0, even with the opponents that they faced, certainly a fun matchup with Minnesota. Do you think either of these teams will make the statement and win two this week?
Man, I don't know. I think both would be pretty substantial dogs to St. Louis in my eyes. I do think Minnesota's not as bad as these last two bye games have looked, and quite frankly, you know, the even the Mizzou game, like they were leading with
They were
like
in that
16
game.
minutes to go against Mizzou, and like at some point they just have to make open shots. Like Minnesota has their limitations talent-wise. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you they don't, but their team is built on 3-point shooting, and their last 5 games they shot 7 for 20. Or last 3 games they shot 7 for 28 against Chicago State, 6 for 22 against Green Bay, and 5 for 23 against Mizzou. And like, if you watch those shots, some of them are wide open, just wide open. Bobby Durkin 0 for 5 against Chicago State, wide open shots. Like Green Bay, I mean, like Jalen Crocker-Johnson made 40% last year or 35% last year, 40% in league play, and he can't make a shot. Like their offense is not, go create one, right? Like they're going to need guys to make shots within the structure of the offense, and they haven't done. They did that their first 2 games, and they won big, and they have not done that in the last 3 games, and they've looked pretty terrible. So, I would think the shots will eventually start going in, but if they don't, I mean, it could get ugly against pretty much any high major opponent.
Yeah, that's probably the most fun of like the 4-team brackets for me, outside of probably the BYU one. I'd say that's a really, really interesting 4-team bracket. I think there's reason why I want to watch all 4 of those teams. Then we move on to the Holiday Classic: Colorado, San Francisco, Washington, Nevada. Washington did not have Steinbach in their last game, and they played close with Southern, which again, I don't know what Steinbach's situation is. They need him like really, really bad.
I would be a bit surprised if he plays next week, from what I've gathered, but not impossible.
Yeah, so I mean, it's more important to have him go for the UCLA USC games. I would think than it would be. I mean, Southern's a good, a really, really good SWAC team. So I don't like, that's not a loss that it's definitely not a loss that would have looked good, but it's not as bad as it would be in many years. Nevada, again, kind of like the losses to Santa Clara and then UC Davis, not a great part of the not great start to the season for this conference. Colorado and San Francisco. Colorado has their they have the win over Providence, but it's not looked awesome. It's not looked all the way awesome for the most part. They played close with Eastern Washington, Montana State. We'll have to see what they get out of this. San Francisco as well, kind of had the Memphis loss. They've been 4-1, but still have a lot to learn about this team. And then the Holiday Invitational with San Jose State, Tulsa, Loyola, and Northern Iowa. And I think Northern Iowa should be able to win that one, but Northern Iowa Tulsa will be a fun matchup if we end up getting that. Considering, I mean, how poor Loyola has looked this year, I don't really think they should be posing as much of a challenge to Northern Iowa. But who knows? That's still a talented team.
Yeah, I think they're not as bad as it looks right now. It looks really bad. I do think that they, you always wonder with teams like that, like if they can just kind of see one go through the hoop, and you think they will do that against Northern Illinois. You never know, but like you would think, like if you win one, does it kind of settle everything down and you figure it out? I don't know. I also think, talent wise they have enough, but Tulsa's been impressive, and Northern Iowa is Northern Iowa. They have size and defense and are tough to play against. So yeah, I would think that should be what the matchups end up being. But yeah, you never know. They get an NIT rematch of Loyola and San Jose State from last year.
To Charleston, we've got the Palmetto division with West Virginia, Clemson, Georgia, and Xavier. I love the West Virginia Clemson matchup. Those are 2 teams that I liked in the preseason. West Virginia has had some interesting moments this year. They're 5-0. They had the blowout win over Pitt, but they also kind of played Mount St. Mary's and Campbell a little closer than you would have hoped. And then Clemson, obviously at 4-1. Kind of killed a lot of the mid-majors they played early, got up to 20 in Ken Pong, dropped after the Georgetown loss. But I'm really fascinated by this matchup of the front court for Clemson against the front court for Clemson, which is good, it's talented, it's skilled, and it can rebound really well, I definitely think. But I also think West Virginia is kind of just a bowling ball physical team that's going to throw a lot of different things at you. Just going to throw bodies. And I don't know how well Clemson is going to be able to withstand that, or anyone really. But if certain teams can, I think Clemson, with the amount of bodies they have in the front court, maybe might be able to withstand that at a high level.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Clemson is the team that people want them to be, they should control this tournament as far as I see it. They're the best team. But Georgia and West Virginia have enough teeth, and I'll give Xavier credit. They got up off the mat and played pretty well last time out. I'm not going to sit here and sell you on Xavier being anything but a bottom-tier Big East team. They're bad, but I do think they're finding their footing a little bit, and, you get them on a short turnaround, see what happens.
Yeah, and I like this one. As I mentioned, I like this West Virginia team. I think that they can be a pain in the ass. I think Ross Hodge teams are always a pain in the ass. We saw that at North Texas. I think it's the same kind of energy. I've been impressed with Brennan Lorian so far as well. So again, another bracket where I feel the two best teams are playing each other in the first round. Didn't really wish that we didn't see that. And then the other Charleston bracket, you got Utah State and Tulane, and then Davidson and Boston College. Boston College, 104 right now. They have the win over Temple. This, I feel like, for the A10 though, Davidson at 4-0 would be maybe not an imperative win to get, but definitely one that the A10 it should be able to reasonably attain for Davidson in this one. That's today. And then Utah State, Tulane, two teams that have been offense slant past couple of years, or at least last year with Utah State and past couple of years with Tulane. Some talented guys as well. Colby King revenge game.
Man, you're probably the only person out there that's thinking that up, but good for you.
Colby
Well
King
done.
is thinking about it.
Hey, I just like that we've put Boston College in its rightful place with the other mid majors. So,
Yeah. Boston College. Yeah. Utah State, though. Do you have any thoughts on Utah State?
Look, I think if they're off to a good start, I've been impressed. I thought, it's amazing to look back at last year's Utah State team and realize how untalented they were outside of Martinez and Falslev. And I think this year they are in a better place athletically and physically, right? Like to have MJ Collins, who I think is off to a really good start and just gives them an edge going to the rim, to have Gary Clark. Like they didn't have a big like that last year that was as efficient and athletic up front. The Perryman kid's been solid at the, trying to handle some ball handling duties, and is like a great defender. I loved him in high school as a defender. So they're a little deeper. I think they have a little bit more athleticism and size. This is a tournament I think they should win, but especially if they're an at-large caliber team, they've shown well so far. But given the lack of opportunity, it's very important that they take care of business here.
Yeah, and then moving on, Paradise Jam also starts today. I think the Green Bay Yale game has probably already started. I don't know what the score is. I haven't been checking. But, man, Akron, Iona, sign me up for that.
Yeah, it's a great game. It should be a lot of fun, honestly. Good kind of measuring stick to see really where Iona is. I'm not sure anyone that they've beaten is that good yet, but they are beating the brakes off people. Akron is a much different challenge. They're also playing a different way. Like I'm impressed with Akron, like in terms of the pace that they're playing with this year. They did so last year too, but they're playing faster and really letting some of these guards fly it up and down. So, yeah, I mean, this front court for Iona is serious with Sabali and Kozi Akametu, and it'll be a good test against a very physical Akron team, how they respond to that.
Yeah, I like this is just gonna be so fun. You've got the Mahafis and Amani Lyles and Stankovic in the front court for Akron. You've got Sabali and Nakametsu, as you mentioned, and all of the guys Iona rotates in with Juggers and Harris and Reed. And then you kind of obviously CJ Anthony, who's been a big story in the backcourt for Iona, and the team with Tavari Johnson and Shama Scott, a bunch of guys that have been good players going up against Anthony and Anglin and Williams. Just really, really good matchup in this. And anyone else that you can want to talk about here? I mean, Yale is currently up by 9 at halftime on Green Bay.
I mean, worried about Charleston.
Definitely
Big disappointment. I do think that Hickman can help kind of save the day a little bit. Helps their point guard play, but I don't know, man. Like, they were pretty underwhelming, metrics wise last year against relatively soft competition, and are now very underwhelming to start this year. I'll be interested to see if they can beat UMass to get this thing going, but if they don't, watch out. This could get ugly quick. And quite frankly, this is not a place that can afford to be with the money that they're spending. I mean, that team is funded like a top A10 team, and they look like a mediocre CAA team at the moment. That is not a good sign.
I have a dream for a UMass Akron MAC matchup in the MTE. Classic MAC game. The other ones to go over, Pensacola Invitational, Prairie View A&M, UT Martin, and then Southern Miss, North Florida. We've talked UT Martin enough on this show. Don't really have many thoughts on that one. Unless you want to jump in briefly.
No, nothing.
Coconut Hoops, Troy Toledo, then Belmont St. Francis. Don't know how St. Francis got into this one.
When does this start?
I gotta look that up.
Like, I mean, this Troy schedule is just banana land. So
Monday.
I mean, that to me is like the most interesting story here.
Monday.
They've played 7 games already. That's got to be one of the highest. Yeah, and then Monday they have to go play in Florida, I assume.
It is
Fort Myers.
Fort Myers.
At FGCU.
Yeah, Toledo doesn't defend anything. They score. They play fast. They do that. Sonny Wilson's fun. Leroy Blyden's been good. Troy, obviously.
I'm rocking with Troy until Troy.
Yeah, Troy. I don't know when the other shoe's going to drop with Troy. If it even does. I mean, Scott Cross is that type of coach. Like, he's a program coach. He wants you to be tough and play those tough games. And I also like Belmont. I mean, Belmont just has by far the much easier first round matchup here with St. Francis. 358 in KenPom in an MTE with teams in the 100s, like the mid 100s, or early 100s. Belmont's defense has been good so far. And then George Mason against Ohio. I'm a little bit panicked about the Bobcats right now after the loss to Bethune. Kind of thought they would be up there challenging with Akron and those guys near the top of the MAC. They're down at 200 in KenPom right now at 1-4. George Mason's not an easy task. They're 5-0.
Yeah, I still want to see more from Mason offensively, but I mean, they wear you out, and it's a tough team to play against, and they're a team that will always be like an elite conditioned team. So especially as you get later in a bracket, you start to wonder, like, on a short prep with all the discipline that you have to play with, can they just kind of plow people over by the end? So yeah, I'm in on Mason here.
And then FAU with a convincing win last night over Pacific, a good Pacific team this year, an improved Pacific team. They'll face Loyola Marymount, who is 6-0. So this is a really fun one in Daytona Beach. Do you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think FAU, short of travel, probably a little more talented, but I gotta give Jalen Shelley credit. I mean, that was a great decision by him to go down, and he's gotten an opportunity to really play, and looks like a legit high major starter. Should make himself a lot of money next year if assuming he wants to bounce back. But he has been a difference maker for LMU. Been very impressed with him.
I think if Jean Vide doesn't play, FAU should be able to win. They'll have a chance even if he does. But I think that's kind of the big question coming in. Will he be able to go? But, man, I like Sunshine Slam. I think it's going to be good this year. Emerald Coast with DePaul, Georgia Tech, and Drake LSU. LSU has looked the best out of all these teams by a lot. Don't think any of these teams are really a tournament threat, though. Maybe LSU can end up being that. But again, I'm far from convinced, and I will still be far from convinced even if they win this. They play Texas Tech on a neutral. Where is that? In Fort Worth on December 7th. That's their first legitimate test if they end up keep winning these games.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to sit up here and tell you that I'm buying LSU stock necessarily, but they get an opportunity here with the way that the schedule is shaken out by design to stack some wins, and I think they have they've done what they were supposed to do so far. I do think their like positional size is pretty impressive. What they're starting, Nwoko and Tamba and Marquell Sutton together, and they're cycling in Jalen Reed. Like they have a ton of size to go with Dion, and that's a pretty good recipe. I'm not totally sold on them shooting the basketball, but
we just got the news. This is obviously going to go up on the pod feed later. So if you're listening live, you just got the news. But if you're listening later, you'll know that Darren Peterson will not play in Players Era next week. I think we kind of have to discuss that a little bit. We kind of mentioned it briefly earlier. Kansas should probably still be able to beat Notre Dame and Syracuse. Don't know, but we'll see. It's going to be tough, but especially for like a Syracuse team who's defended really well so far this year on the inside.
It's a big opportunity, no question. Especially because at the end of the day, the way that the committee works, like you're not going to magically get dinged by the committee because your win didn't mean as much because they were without a key player. It just doesn't happen. So
yeah, I think this is probably a bigger deal for Syracuse and Notre Dame than it is for Kansas.
I think so. I mean, look, the only thing I would say is if Kansas loses both of them, I'm not going to say one is probably not enough.
On Wednesday.
You just start to worry, like, even once Darren's back, like, is he enough? Like, I mean, he'll be enough, but to win games, but like, if they go, like Kansas right now per KenPom is projected to go 17-13. Like, I don't know, like, and I mean, I guess that technically it's probably, and that might be, I don't know even how it would shake out with the third game. Like, is Darren enough to make sure that they're not like a 500 Big 12 team with a bad non-conference? And we have to start talking about, does Kansas miss the NCAA tournament? I don't think that's going to happen. Again, I thought Kansas played well against Duke. I think they'll be fine. But there is a world now where this thing gets very hairy very quickly, and Darren is amazing. I don't know if he's enough to magically snap your fingers and be like, everything's great and we're going to win the league.
Yeah, I talked about this earlier. I think out of like all the high major players on like teams that we expect to be like good, but not like elite, like the Purdue's of the world. Peterson and Bennett Sturts to me are like the two players that like the teams can least afford to lose in order to like in their terms of their irreplaceability based on the roster build and based on just the way that the team is going to play and obviously the talent level. So certainly looking into it. I still think Kansas is talented overall, but big moment for Melvin Council. Big moment for the Kansas depth guys, for Elmarco Jackson, for Jaden Dawson to step up here, and obviously Trey White and Baidunga, who were awesome against Duke. And then I think the last one that I wanted to talk about, because we'll get into we'll get in next week to the like the UConn Illinois game and that type of stuff, the one-offs that we're going to see. But I also will be at the Cathedral Classic next week, which I think is actually a really interesting MTE. In the Northeast, you've got Hofstra, LaSalle, Merrimack, and Penn. A bunch of teams. Hofstra with Preston Edmead has looked awesome at moments, but also struggled at moments. Just a bunch of teams that I think we're going to learn a lot about in the Northeast this year. One of the more fascinating events that we're going to have, I think, next week for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm drinking some Penn Kool-Aid, but yeah, they'll be tested here. I think they might be the lowest in the metrics out of all these teams. Actually, I think Merrimack is right now. No, Merrimack's 259 right now, and Penn's 265. But
yeah, but I think
by the time if Penn beats Drexel tonight, that could flip. So
yeah, and if Penn beats Drexel tonight, Penn will play for a Big 5 championship.
Big time.
Yeah. I think that's all that we've got. Kevin, thank you so much for doing this and bearing with me after we lost Jonathan midway through. But I think that means you've got to take us home.
I don't know if I'm doing that. I give it to you. It's your show, not mine. I'm just
If
happy to be a part of it.
If you came to hear about Tyler Self and where he's working, you came to the right place. If you came to hear about Colby King revenge games, you came to the right place. And if you came to hear about the latest happenings with Caleb Grill, you came to the right place. This is season 6, episode 54, our Feast Week preview with Kevin Sweeney. We will be back, me and Jonathan, next week. I don't know exactly which day, but we will be back next week to talk about what we've seen from players there, what we've seen from Maui. We will be back before Thanksgiving because we got to do some pods. We got to talk some ball. And thank you so much for joining us.